What's up, guys? This is the Board Game Roamer, and I am here with an unboxing. This is a game called Zephyr: Winds of Change. This was actually a game that was kickstarted. It's been a while, and it's funny because I actually looked at this game on Kickstarter when it was coming out and when it was on Kickstarter, and I was really intrigued by the game. I love the game. I really wanted to get it. And there were several other things that came up at the time, and so basically I had to prioritize, and I passed on this. And just recently, I was watching, I believe it was One Stop Co-op Shop's channel, watching for some other games to learn some rules, and I saw this on there, and I was like, "Wait, is that the same thing?" So I watched it, and I was excited all over again. And I looked, and Portal Dragon is the publisher, and they did actually have some on their website, and they even had the Founders Edition, which basically is the base game plus an additional faction you can play. But the game is really cool. It's a 1 to 5 player game. It says 20 minutes per player. It's probably a little bit longer than that, but it's a really good short game. A little bit of a deck builder, essentially. But it's a really cool game, and I'll kind of show you the back. I don't know how you can see that, but you have I guess the equivalent of a quest. I'm going to get this terminology wrong because I have not looked at it enough to know the terminology, but you have this overarching assignment. And you have so many days, and at the end of the last day, typically you're going to fight a boss person who's got some just nasty abilities. And during the days that you're flying around, you're going to different locations, doing different assignments. Some take longer, some are shorter. And while you're doing those assignments, you're getting scrap, which is kind of like the equivalent of money. You're getting items, 4 different levels of items that you're going to go on your ship, and each ship is different. They all have different amounts of slots of the different types of tech and such that you can get. And you can also hire crew. And the cool thing about the crew, which we're going to see in here, is that you have various factions. I believe there's 5 factions maybe, but some number of factions, and then your crew are separate. So you actually take a clear card and put it on top of your faction card, and they're really 2 separate things. So you could have, in this game, I could have my first crew person that I had, we'll call him John. John, when I play through this time, I may want him to be a greaser, which is one of the factions, and then the next time I may want him to be an Imperial, because the Imperial ability is something that I need because I've got a tech or something else already that doesn't require the greaser faction, because I've got somebody else with a similar skill. So those are the sorts of things that I think are really cool, really smart with this. And so, like I said, it's not new, it's new to me, but I'm really excited about it. And this is a limited edition. You can see the merchant expansion included. They called it the Founders Edition. Well, you can't really see that on the screen, but there you go. Now you can. So let's crack this baby open. I have talked long enough. I'll be very careful. Alright, so let's open this baby up. The art's pretty good. Kind of not super refined, but for what it is, and you got to remember, I think this was like a $30-something thousand Kickstarter, maybe 50-something thousand. So it wasn't a huge Kickstarter, but Portal Dragon really did a good job, and they've released several other games recently. I haven't got a chance to play them, but they have. So here's the rule book. Alright, so let's take a quick look see here. So there's an example of one of the ships. Right, so you've got 1, 2, 3 combat locations, 3 maneuver locations, 4 maneuver locations, and 2 command locations, and all that has to do with the different types of items that you can put on here, right? Your ship's abilities and such. So that's your ship mat as an example. And then there's an example of purchasing. You've got 4 levels: bronze, silver, gold, and epic. and then each one of those levels has different types. For instance, this sprocket rocket is a combat, so you couldn't put that in, say, a command location. That's attacks, maneuvers, and tech are the systems that they have. You got hull and armor, basically, or hull upgrades. And so yeah, and then here's an example of the cards. So this Cocytus can be Imperial. He can kill one enemy crew member once per day. It's his normal ability. But if you're playing him with an Imperial, he gets that ability. But I could just as easily put him on the Rogue card. He'd have the same once a day ability, but if I had him on the Rogue card, I could exhaust his Rogue card faction, and now he's got a different ability, basically. So it very much makes them quite unique. And apparently you can also have companions, which is pretty cool. Didn't know that. That's new. So there's regions, assignments. So you're going to take an assignment and you're going to move your standee along this track depending on the different assignments over a course of a number of days, and then at the end of the days you're going to basically fight the last boss. And it's tiered, so you have like 3 tiers, and at each tier, when you go to the next tier, when you go to a region, I think they call them regions maybe, when you go to a region, that ups the difficulty of the AI. So when you start drawing cards for the enemies, on the cards you're going to see where it'll say 1, 2, or 3, and depending on what region you're in, they're going to have maybe more weapons, they're going to have more crew, they're going to have more hull, more armor, more things of that nature, which is going to make it harder for you to take them on. And hopefully you've geared yourself as a result. So there's really a day order is really short. You basically move and explore, and you can either battle or you can search for scrap. But lots of graphics in here, which is good, and examples, which is great. So that's the rule book. And there's the end where you're fighting a warlord, and actually in the end you may fight multiple ships. You personally may fight multiple ships. Then we got a glossary of terms back here. This is good. There were 945 backers, and I was almost one of them. So here's a glossary of terms. What else is back here? If you play as a single player, you can play a little bit differently. So this is a 1 to 5. So that's cool. And this has got recommended starting builds. So here's the 5 different ships, and they're kind of telling you what they suggest you start with for the starting build. But of course, you can do whatever you want. Yep. So cool. And they have a separate piece, which is this first mission tutorial. So they're going to basically guide you through. I think this is called Milk Run. Oh, that's funny. So it's going to guide you through literally step by step every battle, have you pull cards and tell you exactly, what you do with each of the cards, and give you some examples of how that's going to work. So that's really cool. Then you've got cardboard. Because what's the game without cardboard? Now this, I'm going to set these to the side. These are all mostly tokens, except for the ship sheets. And I can tell you that when I was backing this originally, and let's take a quick look at the ships because they're really all very similar. When I was backing this, what I did not know at the time, at least, that I quit following it because I got something else, is that they were doing double layered boards. This is something that I guess the first game I saw do this was Scythe, and I was like, this is awesome. Why does everybody not do this? I understand that it is very difficult to do, and obviously it's very expensive to do, but I think it adds a ton to the board, because, and this is something I wish, like for example, Terraforming Mars had done. So when you put in each one of these slots now, when I put a tile there, I don't have to worry about it sliding all over the place, which, especially Terraforming Mars is the best example of that. I mean, I ended up buying something to fix that, but that's the best example of how that just does not work. So you have these ships, and like I said, each ship is different. So you can see, for example, here, this Spitfire, Rogue Spitfire, only has 3 hull, but it's got a lot more tech items. However, it's only got 2 command items, whereas this Merchant Gypsy has 4 command items, right? 2 maneuver, 2 combat. So they're all very, very different. You'll also notice that on the bottom, you have these slots for down here. This ship has 4 slots for 4 different crew, and the Spitfire only has 2. Okay, and each one of these has an icon. And what this is when you have cards that you're drawing every turn, and you as the captain can play a card, and then your crew can all play a card. And if it's a location like this, if you have a crew member here, then that crew member can count as playing a combat card. But it can only be combat. Here it's only maneuver. Whereas if you go to a ship like this Imperial Scimitar, okay, that's got 4 slots. You have a combat and a tech card, and then 2 any cards, right? So, but again, each board is completely different. Each board is going to have a different size starting hand. It's going to have a different daily or a different, I think they're all once per trip. No, they have different powers that may be once per trip, once per region, once per day that you can utilize. You'll have different starting hands. They'll have different, like for instance, this Imperial Scimitar, starting hand size is 1 card, but for every 2 hull, which is anything in this track, for every 2 you have over here, you get an additional card for your hand size. Whereas this is 2 cards, and it says you start out with 2, but you add an additional card for every 2 ship systems. So all the boards play very differently, which, or at least seem to play very differently, which I really like. I think that's pretty cool that they play like that. And of course, on the back, it's got a rundown, just some flavor, some backstory of this particular ship, how it came to be in the world. If you want to check that out, that's cool. You are more than welcome to do so. So let's take a quick look at this. So this is going to be the punch boards that have all your stands. So it comes with these stands, or standees. It's not any minis. And then each ship, and there's 5 different ships, and there's a different targeting token for each to put down, because you can play, like it says, 1 to 5, and everybody can target different ships, or you can gang up on individual ships. So there's your standees, and then these are all the armor and then health, hull, armor and health, which is basically your hull, and then all the different cards that you have over here to the side, which I'll show you in a second. All those different cards are associated with an upgrade. So this mostly has hull and health, but this has a ton of upgrades. And you can see there's a lot of bronze ones, there's fewer silver, fewer gold, and then these here are these are epic ones. They're stupid amazing, but there's not very many. They're extremely hard to get. You cannot buy them. You have to get them through cards. Also, you have these dials. So you have, for each player has their own scrap meter, which you're going to be able to count and keep up with how much scrap you have. So you have these dials that you'll put together. So that's those. And that glare is really bad over there. I redid my my room that I've got all my stuff in here, and I actually had 2 couches in here, and I moved one out, and I've moved my table back, and my light's still in the same place, and I'm not really exactly sure where I'm going to put it to do what I want to do, so you have to forgive the glare for now. So here's the pieces to make the dials. Here's the standees. Although, actually, give me just 1 second. Okay. All right. So one of the cool things I think about this game is, well, not about this game. One of the cool things about playing board games and collecting stuff is, if you've watched my intro to the channel, I think I talked about one of my first experiences in gaming. One of the early big things that I did was Babylon 5, which was back in TenCon in '98 in Knoxville, Tennessee. We went with a company that had a store in the mall in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and we did Babylon 5. And when I was doing that, when we were playing that, I got a whole bunch of minis, and I didn't really get to play it a lot, but I played it some. But these, right, are actually some of my old painted minis. Now, the system that we played under was great. It didn't last very long. It was the company that did it didn't support it, and it ended up going out. But these are like some small capital, like frigates, and then some fighters that represented fighter squadrons. But it's cool because I think I could use these, and I'll show you as an example. As an example here, these are one of the sets of cards, but you are going to move along this track. Everybody's going to have their own individual assignments, but instead of using the standees, I could use something like that, right? And it would work. Oh, you certainly don't see that. It would work just as well. You know, you use this to track it instead of the standees. I don't know. I just thought of that. That was pretty cool. I've never really had a use for these because never, other than I had one guy that I played with, and we kind of got out of playing and played some other stuff, and we just never got back into it. So I just thought of that. So you can proxy stuff, and that would be a cool thing to proxy. So here's some cubes, and so what these cubes are for are on these sheets, enemy sheets, which I'll show you in just a second. You're going to use these to track the health and such. And that's hard to see, but again, that's got to do with the glare, so I do apologize. You also have 4 dice, and here's the dice. Pretty cool colors. All right, they're a little bit better than your normal dice, so I do like those. That's pretty neat. Smaller, I guess they're maybe 12 millimeter instead of 16 millimeter size dice. Okay, so let's see here. What do we start with? Let's start with this. So this is the deck that I was telling you about. These are the clear cards for your people. Okay, so this is all these different people, right? A whole slew of different people. So what you do is you take all these cards and you shuffle them up. Probably a better way to do that. I don't know how durable these are, how quickly the faces will fade. Hopefully not too bad. I guess I should probably. These would be good examples of ones that I probably should sleeve, which I rarely ever do. But you'll basically shuffle this, and you'll cut it, and you'll take whoever comes up. So in this case, Ulysses Stormheart, right? So we're just going to set him to the side for a second, because what you have next is you have this deck, which is the deck with the card backs. And let's get rid of this. And let me get rid of these guys because these are special guys. And yep. You sort these right quick. There we go. So you've got these cards. So this says, for instance, merchant. So you get merchant. Oh, let me flip them over. That's a better example. So here's an example of a bandit card, right? So the bandit card says draw 1 card, and I know it's very hard to see. It's even hard to see on the card itself. Draw 1 card, play +1 attack this phase once per trip. So there's this bandit. So That's the bandit ability. But then you've got, say, Greaser. Repair one of your currently damaged armor once per day. Well, I've got both of these faction cards that have an ability that I can use and then flip. So this is their own cooldown. And it tells you when you can reuse these, right, and flip them over, unless there's a skill that flips them over. But I could, if I decided to, if I said, hey, I need, I like my boy Ulysses, but I really need to heal some armor, so I'm going to put him on a Greaser card when I pick him. So now I can exhaust him independently of the faction card, and then exhaust the faction card if I need it, or maybe exhaust the faction card and leave him on it and exhaust him when I need him, right? Or I could just as easily say, you know what, I don't need him, I think I'd rather have the bandit card when I pick him. Now once you pick these factions, I don't think you can go back and unpick them, but it's a really cool mechanic so that you get an opportunity to have like a lot more diversity in who you pick. There are a limited number of these, so if you're playing multiplayer in the 2 to 5 range, there's only 4, it looks like, of each faction. And again, in the Founders Edition, you get a 4th faction. So there are a few more possibilities just because I've got 4 extra merchant cards, which is +1 to action, deck roll, or standard reward roll once per day. So you are kind of limited, so that is a tactical thing that you got to do. So these cards with this particular back, these are the what are these? So these are the commanders, I think. Let's see. Is it commander? I believe these are commanders. Yeah. So these are commanders. So these are like, oh gosh, that's horrible. You can't really see that, can you? So these are like guys that you're going to fight that aren't as hard as the warlord, but they are going to be harder to defeat. And when you draw them, they have things like, for instance, Alexander here says draw +1 enemy ships. You'd actually be fighting 2. But you can see, well, hopefully you can see, or at least take my word for it. Each one of these commanders has a set of rewards at the bottom. Sometimes it's scrap, sometimes it's various numbers of bronze, silver, or gold items. And then they also have a list here for combat, and depending on the number of units that they have with them as far as crew, and then of course they're always going to roll at least 1 die, but that's going to determine how much damage they do to you. So that's how those cards work. And then here's another set of cards. These are for the warlords, and these cards are particularly nasty because they're going to augment your warlords, and they're going to give them different tech. Like it's going to draw, this says draw 2 enemy ships per player. All enemy ships have no armor for hasty reinforcements. Or radial concussion. Each player adds 1 enemy ship and rolls. And that can do some where you're losing crew or you're losing cards. All these sorts of things. So those are just nasty cards that are trying to mess with you. Okay, examples of that. So then you've got these 2 decks, which is your scrap deck and your combat deck. And so when you do, and I probably should have showed you these cards before I showed you this, but it's okay. You'll understand it in a second. When you pick an assignment, when you go on an assignment, some of the slots have a question mark, so you can pick in like whatever assignments you want to do. You can do combat or scrap, or you can choose to, it may say you've got to fight an enemy commander, or you've got to do scrap, or you've got to do combat. And so there's this whole really thick deck of cards, actually, that will tell you what to do. So for example, it's got a little flavor text. This one says, a ship swings out of nowhere, barely missing you with its guns. As you return fire, it flees. You chase it into the clouds. As the haze clears, the trap closes. Draw 2 enemy ships. So you're actually going to fight like 2 enemies there. And then there may be other things that maybe you fight a commander, or maybe you lose a crew member. I mean, all these are bad things. Or here's an example of nothing. Basically, you do the combat, pull the combat card, and it says, oh, well, actually, just draw a scavenge card. All right, so there's the combat deck. The scavenge card typically are going to be things like, you know, something that's going to get you some amount of reward in the form of scrap, or maybe it's going to say, you know, you got to go, if you have a crew member, go try to rescue, you know, a crew member's family member or something like that. That's what this card deck does. However, there are scrap cards that say draw a combat card. So you never 100% can be certain when you choose one of these options that you're not going to get the other. Although I would say, at least based on, and you can see this is another pretty thick deck too. So here's an example: family ties. Your last crew that you hired pleads for help rescuing their cousin, making a case that they would be a great addition to the crew. So then you have two options: leave your current assignment, which is kind of what you're working through during the build up to the warlord fight. Leave your current assignment and roll, and that's one option. Or you can choose not to abandon your current assignment. So, you know, you're working towards something in the assignments I'll show you in a second, but basically you have a series of things you do, and the longer the assignment, the better the reward normally. So this second option is you choose basically not to do that, and you lose your crew member, but you don't have to abandon the assignment. So things like that happen in here. And then there's other ones like, yeah, I'm not gonna be able to find one. But it's gonna say, hey, oh, here's one. Fortune favors us, draw one skirmish card. So you went to scrap, and you ended up still having to fight anyway. So them's the breaks, as they say. Of course, they do provide you some baggies, which is good. Although I've started to do some more foam core stuff, so I'm actually kind of considering, for some of these smaller games, I think I could probably make inserts that would be better and cheaper using foam core than buying it. Or some of these, like, I'm sure this doesn't have a insert that anybody's made because there's not enough copies out there to warrant that. Alright, so here's the cards, and I think all these, yes. So this is the stack of tech cards. A crap ton of tech cards. A crap ton of tech cards. And so, of course, you have some starting cards, some basic starting cards, like, here's some bronze, or no, wait, what is this? Anyway, you have each one of these, you can see has there's the face melter. That color and that symbol matches one of the tiles. So that's how the bronze, and there's gold, there's some bronze, different kinds of things, maneuvering, evading, all these sorts of things that you're going to be able to upgrade to. And having not read through the book, I'm not exactly sure how those need to be sorted, so I'm not going to hazard a guess. But you can see there's a significant deck. Of course, some of those are going to be starting cards, because you do have a starting deck for your initial deck. So now let's look at the final set of items, which is these bigger tarot size cards. Alright, so let's see here. Let's kind of sort these by back. So these cards, yes, so these are the warlord cards, and there's 6 of these, it looks like. They have a bunch of health, and it looks like you fight waves, so multiple waves of ships you have to fight. And there's some other symbology on the top that does not compute with me right now, but I can tell you that they do have differing amounts of health So I'm assuming that probably the more waves they have, the fewer health they have. Like this guy's, well, I don't know what that 2 is. I guess that's maybe 2 additional cards warlords or something, or commanders you draw or something like that. But he only has 1 wave. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He's got 10 health. And it says warlord attacks deal direct damage, which I believe bypass your hull, which really sucks. So you have those kinds of cards. Then you have these cards. These are regions. So for example, so basically what the region does, and in some regions you can patrol, some regions you cannot. You have that option. You don't have to take an assignment. You can just patrol basically and take one of these 2 options or something like that. I don't remember exactly. Like I said, it's been a while, but there's all these different regions. So after you complete an assignment, you're going to draw a region, and that region is going to have some sort of effect. It's going to affect your maybe what you can use or something like that. Maybe it's going to give you an advantage. Maybe it's going to give you a disadvantage. But there's several of those, so that's good. A little bit more replayability. Of course, you've got me grabbing too many cards. You got a player aid, front and back, that's going to show you the prices of things. If you take critical damage, what happens. If you choose a reward roll, you roll the d6 and what you get. So you got 4 of those. And again, even though there's 5 factions in the founder's box, it's because the core box normally only has 4. Then you've got these scenario cards, I guess. Yeah, scenario cards. And Guns for Hire, Eternal War, Belly of the Beast, Perilous Waters, Plain and Simple, First Leg. So you actually have 4 cards, but they're double-sided. So you have 8 different scenarios. And you can see, for instance, by the sword, this is the day track and how long it's going to take. And so this is 1 hour per player as opposed to Plain and Simple 20 minutes per player. So it's going to be a lot shorter. And there's also these icons for assignments, and I'll have to show you assignments here in a second. But I think this is like what kind of assignments you have. So some stuff may be just combat, some of it may be exploration primarily, all kinds of different things like that. So there's those. And here's the assignment cards. All right, so the assignment cards are, for instance, this has got 1, 2, 3 stops on it, whereas that one's got 3. So here's one, depending on where you start, it's got a different option for how long it's going to take you. And you got like multiple paths, and you can see the symbol here, so that's got the little keg symbol, whereas that one doesn't. This one's got combat and some scales. So and this is just combat. So you're going to build this pool of assignment cards based on the scenario that you choose. And then during that scenario, as you draw other cards for commanders, these are going to be their ships. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of ships. I'll just show you one example, the Black Rook here. And again, I know it's going to be hard to see, but you can see they've got a health and armor track just like you do. They have a crew like you do, and depending on what region you're in, for instance, this shows crew 233. So if we're in region 1, no crew is going to show up. If we're in region 2, it's going to have 1 crew, and if it's in region 3, we're going to have 3 crew. And for the enemy ships, crew just tells us how many dice they roll. And then each ship, now it's different if it's a ship that's got a commander, he's got his own card. But if it's just a normal, draw a normal extra ship, then it's going to say what happened. So for instance, this Imperial Scimitar class, on a die roll of 1, it's 1 damage. On a die roll of 2, they get -1 damage. On a die roll of 3, it's 1 damage. On a die roll of 4, they restore 1 armor. On a 5 or 6, nothing happens. So, and again, all these are different. It's like there's a 5 and 6 and nothing happens, but that's got some evasion on it. This one is 1 through 5. There's no evasion. It's all damage except for 6. that sort of thing. And so basically what's going to happen is you're going to declare your attack, and you're going to choose your attack, and then you're going to roll for what they do, and all the combat is simultaneous, so it all happens at the same time. And I've already showed you those. So yeah, that is Zephyr Winds of Change. I'm super excited to play this. This is going to be an awesome game. I really am excited to see it, because like I said, I remember you know, the Kickstarter, and I remember thinking, man, I really wish I'd have got in on that. And so, you know, hey, now I've got the opportunity to get in on it, and I am going to do so. So, thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for subscribing. I'm the Board Game Roamer, bringing you Zephyr Winds of Change from Portal Dragon. And I will see you, ladies and gentlemen, in the next video. Bye, guys.